Hello dears, in this video today we are highlighting the Kremlin building in Russia, Moscow, but before we start, as usual, you must remember to subscribe to the channel if you are not subscribed, and support us by liking if you liked the video. As throughout its history, the Kremlin remains the heart of the city. It is the symbol of both Russian and, for a time, Soviet power and authority, and it has served as the official residence of the President of the Russian Federation since 1991. The Kremlin's crenellated red brick walls and its 20 towers, 19 with spires, were built at the end of the 15th century, when a host of Italian builders arrived in Moscow at the invitation of Ivan III, the Great. One of the most important towers, the Savior, Spasskaya Tower, leading to Red Square, was built in 1491 by Pietro Solario, who designed most of the main towers. Its belfry was added in 1624-25. The chimes of its clock are broadcast by radio as a time signal to the whole country. Also, on the Red Square front is the St. Nicholas, Nikolskaya Tower, built originally in 1491 and rebuilt in 1806. The two other principal gate towers, the Trinity, Troitskaya Tower, with a bridge and outer barbican, the Kudafaya Tower, and the Borovitska Tower, rise from the western wall. Within the Kremlin walls is one of the most striking and beautiful architectural ensembles in the world. A combination of churches and palaces, which are open to the public and are among the city's most popular tourist attractions and the highest offices of the state, which are surrounded by strict security. Around the centrally located Cathedral Square are grouped three magnificent cathedrals, superb examples of Russian church architecture at its height. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, these and the other churches in the Kremlin ceased functioning as places of worship after the Russian Revolution of 1917, but services recommenced in most Kremlin churches beginning in 1990. The Cathedral of the Assumption is the oldest, built of white stone in 1475-79, and the Cathedral of the Annunciation, built in 1484-89 by craftsmen from Pskov. Though burned in 1547, it was rebuilt in 1562-64. Its cluster of chapels is topped by golden roofs and domes. Inside are a number of early 15th century icons attributed to Theophanes the Greek and to Andrei Rublev, considered by many to be the greatest of all Russian icon painters. The third cathedral, dedicated to St. Michael the Archangel, was rebuilt in 1505-08. In it are buried the princes of Moscow and the czars of Russia, except Boris Godunov, up to the founding of St. Petersburg. In the same square another Italian architect, Alovisio Novi, erected the five-domed Church of the Archangel in 1505-1508. From the 17th to 19th century, its interior was decorated by wonderful frescoes and an iconostasis. In this church many great princes and czars of Moscow are buried. Among them are Ivan I Kalita, Dmitry Donskoy, Ivan III, Ivan IV the Terrible, Mikhail Fedorovich and Alexei Mikhailovich Romanovs. The Cathedral of the Dormition was built by Pskov architects in 1484-1489. Inside the cathedral some mural paintings of 16th-19th century have been preserved and the icons of Andrei Rublev and Theophanes the Greek are part of the iconostasis. In 1505-1508 the bell tower of Ivan Veliki was built. Being 82 meters high, it was the highest building in Russia, which became the focal point of the Kremlin ensemble. Among the oldest civil buildings of the Moscow Kremlin, the Palace of the Facets, 1487-1491, is the most remarkable. Italian architects Marco Friazin and Pietro Antonio Solario built it as a great hall for holding state ceremonies, celebrations and for receiving foreign ambassadors. The most noteworthy civil construction of the 17th century built by Russian masters is the Teremnoy Palace. From the early 18th century, when the capital of Russia moved to St. Petersburg, the Kremlin mainly play a ceremonial role with religious functions. By the end of the century, the architectural complex of the Kremlin expanded with the arsenal reconstructed after the fire of 1797 by Matvei Kazakov. The Senate was built in 1776 to 1787 according to the plans of the same architect as the home of the highest agency of state power of the Russian Empire, the ruling Senate. Today it is the residence of the President of Russia. From 1839 to 1849 a Russian architect K. A. Thon erected the Great Kremlin Palace as a residence of the imperial family, which combined ancient Kremlin buildings such as the Palace of the Facets, the Tsarina's Golden Chamber, Master Chambers, the Teremnoy Palace and the Teremnoy churches. In the Armory Chamber built by K. A. Thon within the complex of the Great Kremlin Palace, there is a 16th-century museum officially established by the Order of Alexander I in 1806. The crenellated red brick walls, along with 20 towers, were constructed at the end of the 15th century by Italian master builders invited to Moscow by Ivan the Great. The Kremlin wall encloses an irregular triangular area of 275,000 square meters, 68 acres. The total length of the wall is 2,235 meters, with heights varying in line with the terrain from 5 to 19 meters. The wall thickness is between 3.5 to 6.5 meters. Most of the main towers were designed by Pietro Solario, including the Spasskaya, Savior, Tower, topped with its iconic red star and black and gold clock faces. 18 towers were constructed originally, but 2 more were added in the 17th century. At 80 meters, the tallest tower is the Troyskaya, Trinity, Gatehouse, which was constructed in 1495. All but 3 of the towers are square in plan. They were all originally crowned with timber tents, but these were replaced with brick and colored tile arrangements in the 1680. Red Square, closely associated with the Kremlin, lies beneath its east wall. At its south end is the famous Pokrovsky Cathedral of Saint Basil the Blessed, one of the most beautiful monuments of Old Russian church architecture, erected in 1555 to 1560 to commemorate the victory of Ivan the Terrible over the Kazan Khanate. In the 17th century the cathedral gained its up-to-date appearance thanks to the decorative finishing of the domes and painting both inside and outside the cathedral. The construction of Red Square was finished by the late 19th century together with the erection of the Imperial Historic Museum. Today the State Historical Museum, the upper trading rows, GUM, and the middle trading rows. In 1929, Lenin's mausoleum, designed by A.V. Shusov and an outstanding example of the Soviet monumental architecture, was finished. Criterion, I. The Kremlin contains within its walls a unique series of masterpieces of architecture and the plastic arts. There are religious monuments of exceptional beauty such as the Church of the Annunciation, the Cathedral of the Dormition, the Church of the Archangel and the Bell Tower of Ivan Veliki. There are palaces such as the Great Palace of the Kremlin, which comprises within its walls the Church of the Nativity of the Virgin and the Teremnoy Palace. On Red Square is St. Basil the Blessed, still a major edifice of Russian Orthodox art. Criterion, E. Throughout its history, Russian architecture has clearly been affected many times by influences emanating from the Kremlin. A particular example was the Italian Renaissance. The influence of the style was clearly felt when Rudolfo Aristotele Fioravanti built the Cathedral of the Dormition, 1475–79, and grew stronger with the construction of the Granovataya Palace, Hall of the Facets, 1487–91, by Marco Friazin and Pietro Antonio Solario. Italian Renaissance also influenced the towers of the fortified enceinte, built during the same period by Solario, using principles established by Milanese engineers. The Nikolskaya and the Spasskaya towers both date from 1491. The Renaissance expression was even more present in the classic capitals and shells of the Church of the Archangel, reconstructed from 1505 to 1509 by Alovisio Novi. Criterion, IV. With its triangular enceinte pierced by 4 gates and reinforced with 20 towers, the Moscow Kremlin preserves the memory of the wooden fortifications erected by Yuri Dolgoruki around 1156 on the hill at the confluence of the Moskva and Neglinaya rivers. The Alexander Garden now covers the latter. By its layout and its history of transformations, in the 14th century Dmitry Donskoy had an enceinte of logs built. Then the first stone wall. The Moscow Kremlin is the prototype of a Kremlin, the citadel at the center of old Russian towns such as Pskov, Tula, Kazan or Smolensk. Criterion, v. From the 13th century to the founding of St. Petersburg, the Moscow Kremlin was directly and tangibly associated with every major event in Russian history. A 200-year period of obscurity ended in 1918 when it became the seat of government again. The Mausoleum of Lenin on Red Square is the Soviet Union's prime example of symbolic monumental architecture. To proclaim the universal significance of the Russian Revolution, the funerary urns of heroes of the revolution were incorporated into the Kremlin's walls between the Nikolskaya and Spasskaya towers. The site thus combines in an exceptional manner the preserved vestiges of bygone days with present-day signs of one of the greatest events in modern history. Top Kremlin attractions. The Kremlin also serves as Moscow's top tourist destination and attracts millions of people every year during its Russian travel journey. There are so many sights to see, from its palace buildings to its places of worship, that the better part of a day should be budgeted in any attempt to view it all. Watch the video below to explore the site prior your trip with the help of our lovely representative Vera and see the stunning palaces inside of the Kremlin walls. A good example of just one important site is Cathedral Square, the fortress' most breathtakingly beautiful location. Centered here are the limestone-faced Cathedral of the Dormition, the location of imperial coronations, the gilded domed Cathedral of the Annunciation, personal chapel of the imperial family, and the Cathedral of the Archangel Michael, burial location of many of Russia's czars. Here we come to the end of the video. We hope you enjoyed with us. See you in the next video with an interesting topic.